Hey, welcome to Northpointe Plus. This is the podcast that happens after the Sunday talk where folks get to ask questions and then somebody tries to answer them. And we never know what's going to happen because the script is really thin.
Because it's a conversation.
It's a conversation.
That's right.
This is Jake Howard. I'm just kidding. This is Rick Rubel, our lead pastor. My name's Chris Carter, and this is episode 70. So we've hit 70 of these. If you've not seen those, go back, and now we know what you're doing at the weekend. So
yeah. So before we jump into any questions or talk,
we got a lot of questions, Rick.
I know.
There's a ton of them.
But people are dying to know, so tell us about
People are dying to know.
People want to know.
I don't know.
Tell us about Marketplace Chaplains.
Marketplace Chaplains. So if you were here Sunday, they made the announcement that a few weeks ago resigned from Northpointe. I'll still be here at Northpointe. Don't plan on moving. Don't plan on going anywhere. We'll attend Northpointe, which will be kind of fun, by the way. 30 years. I've never attended a church. I've always been on, and you feel this, on staff. So that's just a different.
More than 40 for me.
Yeah.
Wow. Actually, that's not true because when I was at the college,
fair.
During those years, I was
a normal person at a church.
Sort of, but I traveled for the college a lot. So
yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I've never been a normal person, so this is new for me. I don't really know how to.
There is no such thing as a normal person. Only levels of abnormality.
I'm going to be normal. I'm going to be the first.
That's good. Hey, before you talk more about Marketplace Chaplains, we have a studio audience member today. Just want you to know if you were here in the North.
Can we just pause? We have a studio audience. That just sounds like Price is Right there.
Come on down.
You've 1980s.
You have Price is Right stories to tell, right?
I do, and that's probably why I thought of it. But anyways, I'm sorry I interrupted, but
that's okay.
Studio audience.
So tell us more about. Keep going. Marketplace Chaplains. You resigned.
We need a script. Basically, is what we're trying to say.
This is good.
Marketplace Chaplain is an organization that has been around for 40 years. They provide chaplain services for businesses and corporations, and so I've been working with them a little bit for the last few months in a real limited capacity, a few hours a month, doing chaplain or what we call worksite visits. So I show up to a factory, a company, assisted living facility, and see how people are doing, see what's going on. I get to be a person they vent to. I get to be a person that helps coach through whatever they're thinking about with the goal of sharing Christ at some point in some way. And so for folks who are already Christ followers, I get to bring that into play immediately. And for folks who are not there yet, it's pre-conversations and the goal of eventually getting there. Meanwhile, helping folks to maintain just good emotional, mental and spiritual health stuff. So I was offered opportunity a few weeks ago to slide into a director role there. So I will end up having about 30 chaplains under my span of care. So I'll coach them as they do worksite visits. And then there's just some administrative functions as well as maintaining partnerships with the companies that we already service. And then I'll still also do chaplain worksite visits as well, so I won't lose that. So it really is the best of all worlds. It's kind of a cool thing.
So for people who are listening who are thinking, I work for a company, it would be a really cool thing to have a chaplain. What would, is it just a matter of calling you?
Yeah. Contact me is probably the easiest way to do it. There's a process for it and there's a, whatnot, but that's just the single point of contact would be easy. Just give me a shout. We'll get you underway.
And for the people who listen who are business owners, you're being paid because businesses pay for the service.
There's a cost to it for the business owner or for the corporation owner or the franchise, however that plays out. And so, that's how we're funded. We're not on donation based or anything like that.
So you could be a marketplace chaplain for Dairy Queen and just go from Dairy Queen to Dairy Queen all over the state of Michigan.
We have marketplace chaplains. We have chaplains in local Chick-fil-A's.
Wow.
I'm just saying, if you're into Chick-fil-A, then Dairy Queen, whatever corporations we got. So
that's fun.
Yeah. Anyways, that's that kind of thing. But there you go.
We're gonna miss you, but we're glad that you're still here.
I appreciate that, and I'm not going anywhere. So that's the other side of it.
All right.
You can't get rid of me.
Oh, good.
Like a bad virus, it just keeps hanging on.
Didn't you just change offices?
I did. I don't want to talk about that. I hate moving stuff.
You've practiced now.
I'm really good at it. Helped me fit out, so that's kind of good.
That's good.
Are we ready for some questions?
Sure.
So we got questions that go all the way back to the December 26th that we wanted to be sure that we tackled, just the way the holidays worked and whatnot. We shot some of those ahead of time. So anyways, we always say we want to answer every question that comes out.
Yep.
Almost every question that comes out, because some of
there
them
are no bad questions.
No, there are bad questions. there are bad questions, and that's usually the question that was just answered. That's what we always say in the education environment.
That's right.
It's the only bad question.
The only bad question is
Also, other bad questions. So,
there are sometimes.
Anyhow, so this comes from December 26th from one of our friends named Ethan, and he says this: what's the difference between God's calling or will, that experiencing God theme, and responding to God by choosing what to give to God? He talks about seeing balance and tension between obeying God's will and getting to respond in our relationship with God through free will. So there's a lot of questions kind of packed in there, but
that gets really kind of fuzzy, but let me just talk in big terms, and then we can kind of have a conversation about it. In experiencing God, we talked about this sense that it's not about what God's will is for my life, that there is one specific will, that kind of thing, but that God has a will, that everyone should come to know Him. Mm-hmm. His will is that the world would be redeemed, that would be in right relationship with Him. So there is this big sense of what is God's will, period. Or question mark, not a specific aspect of God's will. So there's that piece of it, but then there's how we respond to God's will, and what that looks like in our lives. And God does give us a tremendous amount of free will in that. Mm-hmm. We can pursue our will within the context of God's will, or we can pursue God's will and let that filter what our choices are. And that's I think what that tension is that Ethan's mm-hmm. talking about. And I don't know that there's an easy answer except to say, I think if we keep our focus on the big picture of God's will, in the situation of even your resignation to leave in Northpointe, that's really a great case study or whatever to say, okay, what's God's will? God's will is that all people should come to know Him. Sure. We talk about our vision as a church, helping lead all people to a growing relationship with Jesus. That's what you're doing. You're fulfilling God's will. You're just changing locations at this point in time because there's a sense that God has been leading you that direction for a long period of time. And so that's the thing. I think when we pursue the big picture of God's will, that as long as we don't force our will, that we don't pigeonhole God's will into our will, we're on the right track.
Yeah, I agree. That fuzzy concept, I mean, it's really hard to draw that thick line, especially as we do more what we're supposed to do, which is abide in Christ.
Right.
So the closer we get to Jesus, and I always think of that psalm that says, delight yourself in the Lord to give you the desires of your heart. Yep. The more I delight myself in the Lord, the more my desires match His desires. It's not that He gives me the things that I want. It's just I end up wanting the same things He does. That line becomes even less clear, because we just want the same things.
Yeah, it's funny. It makes me think back to conversations. You probably had the same kind of conversations with students where they would say, "Oh, I have got to go to this particular university, or because this is the career. If I don't go there, my life's going to be a waste." Yeah. And being able to say, "No. If God is God, He can take your degree from Podunk University." Just as easily and use it for His kingdom, just as easy as He can take your degree from Harvard or Yale or whatever and use it for His glory. Yeah. It's all about being on God's page, not on our page.
So I find like encouragement or relief is the right word I'm trying to find in that our thing is to lean into Jesus.
Yep.
Is to put the energy into chasing Him, being like Him, and the other stuff becomes, however you want to put that, secondary white noise.
It falls in place.
Yeah, it falls in place. It's just I don't have to stress that so much.
Right.
I'll stress the abiding in Christ.
Right.
And then the rest of the stuff is
stay centered in Him.
Good. Yep. Ethan, hopefully that tackles what you were trying to ask. If not,
Ethan,
blame me completely. So.
It's the host problem.
It's how I read the question. So. Question popped out from after January 1st, that New Year's Day service. Talked about, thanks for the encouragement about refocusing. They really liked that. And then they're asking if there's areas where we see Northpointe refocusing in this next year. So is there stuff that you want to talk about there? We've kind of talked about some of this already. They've been part of the podcast, but maybe a good time to renew that.
It's funny because when I hear that question, sometimes I get a little freaky in my position because everybody says, what's your vision for the church in 23?
Yeah.
Well, I want us to abide in Jesus.
Yeah.
There really is this sense I want us to keep pursuing what God wants for us as a church. And obviously 23 is a transition. You stepping off staff, that changes things. The staff changes that we've had, that changes things. Figuring out what that is. Our partnership with Stadia and Mohi in Africa, that adds a piece. I'm not sure what God's doing, but I want us to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to see where God's working and to pursue that, to join him in that. It really is. I think 23 for us is going to be an extension of the Experiencing God study, where there really is this sense of, okay, where's God working? Where in our life group, where's God working? In our community, where's God working? In our ministry area, where's God working? And what can we do to join him in that and to make a difference that lasts for eternity?
Which it really dovetails from where we've been with Vision for the last couple of years, which is the whole, everybody that calls Northpointe home knows what Jesus is doing in their lives and regularly sharing with people in their sphere of influence. So that's that experiencing God concept.
It's all connected. Yep.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Good. That brings us to the most current questions then. So
should we talk a little bit about the new series?
Yes, we absolutely should. Yes, Rick, we should do that now. You want to talk about the new series?
So
this will be my last podcast ever, folks. So thanks for hanging with me.
Not.
Hey, this is fun. We're like going stories within stories. I don't know how many you're going to follow this, but Ben V, one of our friends on Sunday, texted me and said that I should be the new podcast host. So this comment right here,
nice.
Maybe God's up to something. No, I'm out. You guys don't want me to do this. Okay, new series. That's what we're talking about.
So we started this new series called Always Hustling, and I talked about it in the intro, just that it really is about this sense that God's plan for us brings order to our life, because that's what Jesus modeled, and that's how Jesus lived, and that's what he wants for us. He doesn't want us to live this frenetic life where we're always chasing stuff, trying to figure out how to catch up or where we're supposed to go or that kind of thing. And so it really is about financial issues, but it's also about it's about margin, and it's about time, talent, treasure all together. For me, part of the need to do the series is because it's about generosity as well. Part of the need to do that is because I think it's so easy for us to get a skewed view of all of those things, and to have it be about us, about our financial situation, about what we have to have, what we have to pursue, that kind of thing. And so this first message really is about bringing whatever we have to God first. The first fruits is the phrase that's there in Proverbs 3. And so that's kind of what we talked about, big picture.
Yeah, good. And if you weren't here Sunday and you didn't get a chance to watch that sermon, probably good to just catch that, and that way you'll kind of know what's coming next. And it's easy ways to find that. If you're in YouTube, you go to YouTube, just type in Northpointe with an E, CC, and you'll see our channel pop up. You'll see the green arrow. You can't miss that. If you just type in Northpointe like it should be spelled, you'll end up at a very different church that's, run by my personal friend, Andy Stanley. Not really. I don't know him. I know him. He doesn't know me. But anyways, so you can find it on YouTube. You can also just go to our website, northpointecc.org, and you'll see it right on the messages, sermons, watch now. I forget what we call it now at the header, but you'll find that. So, and those are all uploaded by Tuesday, the day after, a couple days after, Monday or Tuesday. So
Sunday afternoon. Right?
Sunday afternoon. We just looked off camera at our producer here. We never. Come on, man. He's supposed to stay quiet. That's
Facebook
Chucky T.
Facebook. If they go to the Northpointe Facebook page,
you can find
that's
those.
the place that you can watch the entire service. That's where the live stream goes immediately. But the app, YouTube, the website,
really easy ways to catch that.
Should be in all those places.
You touched on first fruits, so it makes some sense. We got a question about that. It says this. I'll just read the whole thing. Is giving your first fruits a mindset or specific teaching on giving to the church? Do you set aside money to give to help others wherever there's a need from your first fruits, or should you bring your first fruit offering to the church and then give on top of that? In the weeds on giving, tithing, first fruits.
I think Couple of big picture pieces, principles that are there. One is, I said this at the end of the message, this is not a legalistic thing. Mm-hmm. It's not something that we have to do to be accepted by God. But I think that you can look at the Old Testament in terms of how God interacted with his people and see principles that are there and begin to apply them in a way that makes sense. I think as I read through the Old Testament, there was this sense that the first fruits, that the tithe went to the priest, went to help take care of God's business. And then there were additional offerings that happened on top of that added even, that people gave over and over and over again. So I would say, I do think that it's a mindset that has teeth, if that makes sense. It's a mindset that has a very tangible aspect. So it's not this kind of thing that we say, I want to give first to God, so I'm going to pool up this storehouse of money, and I'm going to dole it out wherever I want. And if the church gets some of it, that's good. I think that there really is this concept that we give first back to the kingdom through the local church, and then we give other things in other places additionally on top of that. And I think that God works through that. He works through the church. The church is his plan A, and that's how I'd answer that question.
Yeah, and you mentioned on Sunday that concept of priority and where our priorities, and this reflection of priorities. And again, it makes me think of that Matthew passage that where your treasure is, there your heart will be. And so as we shift our brain to putting it, whatever's the most important thing to us.
Right. The language I used yesterday, and it was funny because sometimes we try and come up with, when we're speaking, we try and come up with
words.
A turn
You're
of a
looking
phrase.
for words.
Yeah, we try and come up with words. A turn of the phrase that's memorable, that kind of stuff. But the whole imagery of the front of the line, what's at the front of the line?
Yeah.
And that when we give our first fruits to God, we put him at the front of the line. It really is. I didn't talk about developing a budget and all that kind of stuff, but it really is in that process that you would say, okay, here are my fixed expenditures. Here are the things that here are my fixed things. Here are my discretionary things. And the first thing that you put there is I'm going to give to the kingdom. I would say through the local church. That's the place that you start, and then you start working down through all the other things, through savings and housing and groceries, all that normal stuff.
Yeah, as opposed to it being the thing that comes after entertainment, discretionary fund, shoe allotment, extra shoestring allotment. Oh, also, we should probably figure out if we're going to give.
And I think that for a lot of people who listen, for a lot of people who are just trying to figure this out, that don't have the benefit, we'll talk about Tricia in a second, that don't have the benefit of having learned how to do this at an early age, that there really is this sense of, oh, wait a second, no, I've got to pay all my bills. I go to Starbucks. I have this activity, and at the end, you know what? I've got an extra 20. It's not gonna hurt me. I can put my 20 in the offering, and we're good to go. That's a completely different kind of mindset than when you say, no, I'm going to start here, give to God first, and that's going to determine how I spend the rest of my money. In the same way that if my child had a medical condition that demanded lots of extra expense, that would be the first thing that would go, and that would determine where I lived. That would determine what kind of car I drove. That would determine how often I went out to eat. All those kind of things. That would be at the front of the line. It's that same concept that we just put God at the front of the line and go from there. Yeah.
You mentioned Tricia. We got a question on that. Yeah. So what did the question was just like, oh, she was great.
Wasn't she cute?
Yeah, that's not a question, by the way. Yeah. But if you were here yesterday, you I'm like, wait, was that yesterday? That's yesterday. Yeah. You met Tricia Fish, and so.
She's a hoot. It's just been really fun since she started coming to church, and I think her story is so cool that a friend invited her, and then she invited another friend whose family is now a part of Northpointe, and it's just cool how God works through that. But when I got to know her, and found out as a 15-year-old kid, she gives every week consistently. Once she started her job, I just thought that's such a great, that's a story I want to tell because I know that there are parents that need to be thinking, how can I teach my kid to do that?
Yeah, sure.
And there are adults that need to be challenged to think, if a 15-year-old kid can do that, should maybe I be making some changes and do that as well? And it's easy as an adult to say, oh, she's a 15-year-old. What expenses does she have?
Yeah, true.
But if you know very many 15-year-olds, they could come up with a long list of things that they have to be spending their money on.
Sure.
And she's chosen to really limit it to 3 things. She's saving a big amount of money. She's giving to the kingdom. And then she's living on 30%. Yeah. And for all of us, if we were to say, oh, I'm going to live on 70% or 80% or whatever it is, 90%, that is what I'm going to live on. Once you make that decision, lots of other things fall in place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a related question here that talks about using the word bring, they put in air quotes, instead of give. And is that a major issue?
It's not, I think it's one of those things that in prepping the message that I just think is really interesting because in the context of the message, I said, our attitude matters in terms of our giving. And it's easy for us to have what we give back to God to be a checkoff thing, to just say, oh, okay, I do that. I'm going to give, whatever.
Or I have to do that.
I have to do that because that's what a follower of Jesus does.
Right.
That's a completely different thing than having this attitude of saying, oh no, everything that I have is because of the goodness of God. And I want to bless him. I want to honor him. I want to give back to him. I want to bring back to him what he's given to us and what he's given to me. And so I think it is it is a word thing, but it reflects our attitude. And I loved when I asked Trisha, I think, for service.
She came up with that too.
She said, no, I don't give it. I bring it.
Called you right
back
on that. That's good stuff. All right. So let's shift gears a little bit. A little bit. Put on your Old Testament Jewish culture from the BCE time frame in a culture we barely understand. And somebody had a question based on the Exodus 13 passage you used.
Yeah.
They want to know more about what does redeem every firstborn among your sons mean. So maybe frame that verse for us a little bit. And then if you want to tackle that, I won't argue with you at all.
Great fun. So Exodus 13, I used multiple times because it talks about that really is where that first fruits concept gets fleshed out very specifically in terms of God's teaching to the Israelites. This is something I didn't have time to go into, but contextually, and we talk all the time about, okay, what's the context that makes sense? God's talking to the Israelites after they have come out of Egypt and been slaves. And so the question is, okay, what allowed them to come out of slavery? It was because Moses came down and said, "Let my people go." Charlton Heston voice. It was because God sent these plagues, and the last plague was the death of the firstborn of every living creature in Egypt, except those who had a Passover lamb, the blood of the Passover lamb wiped on the doorframe of their home. So that concept of the death of the firstborn or the consecration of the firstborn for the Israelites was tied very directly into what they had just experienced that allowed them to leave Egypt. So it's not that God said, "Oh, everything's mine, so you have to give it back to me." It was a very tangible expression of what that looked like to say, hey, remember just a few months ago, remember when all of the firstborn cattle died? Remember when all of the firstborn goats died? Remember when all of the firstborn sons died? You need to give offering. You need to redeem. You need to sacrifice to help you remember that I'm the one who brought you out of slavery, and that the way that happened was because a perfect Passover lamb was sacrificed that kept you from having to experience that. So in Exodus 13, when it says, the firstborn, all of that's mine, and it says, redeem your firstborn son, there's not this sense that you had to, clearly it was not that they needed to sacrifice and kill their firstborn son.
Right.
Because God said, no, you don't ever do that.
Right.
But it was this sense that you need to be reminded that there was a perfect Passover lamb that paid the price for your son to live. So when a child was born, remember what happened at Passover. Remember that you were spared that because of the lamb, the sacrifice that took your place. And man, there's tons of application of that for us as followers of Jesus, because Jesus is the perfect lamb, the perfect sacrificial lamb for us that allows us to have a relationship with Jesus. So the concept that's there is just a really cool thing, and that when we give our first fruits, it's a reminder of that God gives to us, but it's a reminder that God provides, and it's a reminder that God that through Jesus, all of that was taken away. All of the penalty of our sin was taken away through Jesus. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, because I don't know what to do with this, because most of us are old enough that we don't really remember this culturally. But for a lot of years, the influence in the Catholic Church was, don't use birth control. You have big families. That's kind of the standard deal, and that typically the firstborn son in a Catholic family would become a priest. That's a part of the whole Catholic culture. And if the firstborn didn't do it, there was this expectation that one of the sons, at least one of the sons, is going to become a priest. How do I know that? Because I watch lots of movies about. Actually,
that's how I get most of my history too.
That's right.
I watch a lot of movies.
But there was in the culture of the Catholic faith, there was this sense that that was just part of what you did, and that's a ripple back from Passover and from the firstborn being spared. So yeah, cool stuff.
Wow, good deep dive there on Exodus 13.
You like it?
Yeah, somebody got extra credit out there, and I like that. So real hard shift away from first fruits and redeeming firstborn, and the fact that one of Rick's sons has to be a Catholic priest now.
That's right. Don't tell Joe.
I won't. Does he watch this? He's in trouble.
No.
Apparently there was a sporting event. There's sports.
Yeah,
that's a thing.
Yes, there is.
Go figure. And there's a sport called rugby. Is that? I'm just kidding. So we're all familiar with football, the football game. Damar Hamlin was hurt. I mean, it sort of rocked really the nation, if not even further. Certainly because of the level of injury and the immediate response. I mean, there's been lots of chatter. I'll take that moment to shout out to first responders, because in my channels, there's lots of chatter about how those first responders acted right away. And we're probably the least paid people on the field, lowest paid people. And yet in that moment, like life and death kind of thing. So the question here though is, and it's a lot of question in here, but some of the question revolves around a sense that this person has about kind of like, that's great. That was an exciting thing to see, especially as people prayed. I was talking with someone on Sunday, and they were talking about this as well, about how nobody has pushed back on prayer on a football field, or kneeling on a football field, or bringing God into the mix. No one said anything about it. Maybe it's early still. And so this question here is feeling that was very cool. Also a little frustrated because people just turn to God like when there's this need that happens in crisis. And then they want to know if you think football should be made illegal. But then just the people that are praying for Damar and rapid recovery. There's like 57 questions in here. Yeah. And I don't know really where to go with all of that. But maybe start with... how did you? I mean, you probably saw that. You certainly.
I was watching
articles.
it.
So
I'm a Bengals fan.
Yeah.
So I'm watching the game, and it happens. And if I just talk real transparently, I'm thinking this is just the weirdest thing ever. That so many people who live a life that appears to be very far from God. Okay, there's a crisis and they're calling out to God.
Yeah, that's part of the tone of this question here.
Yeah,
What is that?
So what do you do with that? And I'm just trying to watch this, and yet seeing obviously the emotion and everything that was going on. For me, I don't know that for everybody it's personal. Watch it. I love football, and my sister works at University Hospital in the ER and OR, and so I texted her the next day and said, "Do you see anybody?" She said, "No, cardiac unit." He was in the cardiac unit, but she has worked the Bengals games as a responder in her area of specialty, and so I'm just trying to process stuff and thinking, man, so many people in crisis, just that is their. It's not even their default. It's the only thing that you can do.
Right.
When it's the same kind of thing. When the Twin Towers fell, all of a sudden everybody's saying, pray, because you can't control things. Right. That's a really cool thing. And part of what I wanted to communicate yesterday was to say, even though the crises in the lives of our friends may not reach cardiac arrest in front of millions of people on TV, we know people who are going through crisis that really are desperate for somebody to voice a prayer for them, to help them with that. And we don't want to miss that opportunity because it really is a time that people are open to God working. Yeah. And God's working there. We need to join him in that. The thing that's really interesting to me now, I could talk about this for a long time. I thought when I read Orlovsky's prayer to Deb on Tuesday or Wednesday, I couldn't hardly get through it because I thought, good night, the courage of this guy on ESPN to say, we're not just going to talk about it, I'm going to do it. And it's very clear if you go to YouTube and watch Orlovsky's prayer. Dan Ermitlou, would you post the link for that, please, in the show notes? It's very clear that he's not just somebody who's talking about prayer. Right. He knows God. Yeah,
he believes in it.
It's there. And so then I watch on Sunday, and it's just really interesting that Troy Aikman, famous football player, who I wouldn't, he's not somebody that I would say, oh yeah, that's a Christian guy that speaks for Jesus all the time. But Aikman's deal is, he said, and I wish I could come up with the exact words, but basically he said, yeah, we believe in prayer. Lots of people are praying. DeMar is doing incredibly well. It's because people have prayed. Yeah. I thought that rocks, because people need to know it's not just about saying, oh yeah, love and prayers. Right. We're thinking about you. We're praying for you, and not really doing anything. Right. God, when we pray, God hears, and it leads to all kinds of questions, because it's like, oh, is DeMar Hamlin recovering so quickly and so totally, it appears like, because so many people prayed. Right. And what if so many people prayed and he didn't recover? Or in some other scenario where lots of people have prayed for a thing and it didn't happen. There's lots of interesting pieces in that. And like, if only half the people were praying, would he still be in a coma? Yeah. There's no way to know that. All we can do is really just recognize that when somebody's in crisis, we're in crisis, we need to talk to God. Well, one of those sticky questions is the final question in this battery of question, which is, does God hear the prayers of people who aren't in a relationship with him? Because it's possible that lots of these people who are praying don't know Jesus. So I think that the answer to that's yes. I think there's, we talk about prayer in terms of being communication, our communication with God.
Sure.
I think that the level of communication that you have with somebody that you know intimately is different than the level of communication that you have with somebody that you don't know intimately. And so I think that there is a quality and aspect to people who are sold out to Jesus, who are disciples of Jesus, who are abiding in Jesus. When they pray, there's a different element of both how they pray and how they pray, and maybe even not maybe how God responds to that. But I think that God absolutely hears people when they pray, or he would never hear the prayer of
faith.
anyone.
How would anybody come to faith? So at least we know.
Yeah.
He hears that.
Yeah. And God's, God is a God of mercy and compassion. And so it's not his desire that people, die tragically. It's not his desire that there be carnage. It's not his desire that bombs go off, all that kind of thing. And so, so when we talk to him, and ask him to move in the midst of horrible circumstances, I think that he hears those prayers. It doesn't matter where they come from. Yeah. And that oftentimes a person who is far from God, when they pray and God responds, it's like an aha moment that everything changes because God really is who he said he is and really does respond. Now we need to be ready to come alongside people because God doesn't always respond the way that we want,
right?
And sometimes people die, and we need to help people make sense of that.
Yeah.
So
well, and if nothing else, maybe the best way in my head to think about this is we can certainly know God hears the prayers of those who know him.
Right.
So this question comes from someone who I'm going to assume knows Jesus. He hears your prayer. Right. That's powerful.
Right.
So it's good.
Yeah.
That's it. We did it. We made it, I think, all the way through the questions, at least the ones that I remembered reading. So anything else? If not,
I don't think that there was anything else that ended up down at the bottom of my notes that didn't make it in. That,
We'll
to talk about.
We'll call it a wrap on this podcast. You guys can help us out by commenting, sharing, liking, doing all that social media stuff. That helps this move a little further, and that's what we're trying to do with this. Move it a little further each time. We think there's good stuff that's contained here, and so we'd love your help in that. Plus, it's fun to talk with you, so feel free to make those comments. And until podcast 71 comes, or next Sunday, we'll see you then.
See you then.